Buckhurst Hill County High School in Essex. From the uncertainty of war to thriving grammar school. Then from modern comprehensive to this, just 50 years after it first opened its doors. Over the next 30 minutes, we'll take a look at the highs and lows of this unique school's turbulent history, uncovering the events and the people that ultimately led to the untimely demise of this much-loved beacon of the community. In 1938, Buckhurst Hill County High first opened its doors as a shiny new grammar school in Chigwell, despite its name, surrounded by fields in this most idyllic of settings. It began life as a fee-paying school, but boys would soon enjoy free secondary education as part of the selective entry state system. Boys such as Stan Newans, who went on to be the first Member of Parliament to have attended the school.
When I went to the school, my parents had to agree to pay 5 guineas a term, which was quite a lot. I mean, a working man earned about £7 a week, so that would tell you roughly the equivalent.
First at the helm of Buckhurst Hill was Jack Taylor. Jack's father, one of the first professional golfers in England and 5 times winner of the Open Championship, had no intentions for his son to go to university, but Jack defied his father and left Oxford with an MA under his belt. He managed to recruit an impressive teaching staff to guide the boys through their secondary education.
The teachers were committed to obtaining good results. I think it was a school with a very high standard and serious, conscientious teachers.
This was the start of the golden age of grammar schools, as championed by successive Tory governments. For boys who studied there, it was a chance to climb the ladder of opportunity. However, little did anyone realise quite how far the world was about to fall. The looming threat of war was fast becoming a reality. Some pupils were evacuated from Essex, being on the fringes of London. 3 of the 5 staff were immediately called up for service, and within just 1 year of opening, Buckhurst Hill was under army occupation. The polished parquet that the boys were not even allowed outside shoes on now beat to the drum of military boots.
We had to know where the air raid shelters were and to practice going, if there was an alarm, into the air raid shelters.
Despite the turbulence outside, inside the gates, extracurricular activities attempted to carry on. Sports and theatre productions kept a flame of hope alive in the young hearts and minds of the pupils remaining at the school. But then in July 1944, just when it seemed that Buckhurst Hill had escaped the ravages of war, a doodlebug hit the caretaker's cottage, destroying the building, blinding the caretaker himself, and injuring some of his family. The dining hall was also heavily damaged. Miraculously, the headmaster had taken the decision to finish the summer term early due to the danger of these flying bombs. Had the school been open, that dining hall would have been full of pupils.
I can still remember listening to the throb of their engines as they went over and hoping that they didn't stop, because that meant that they'd come down on us.
With the war finally over, Buckhurst Hill County High School could once again bathe in grammar school glory, for this was its heyday.
At the end of the war, the first generation of pupils were just starting to leave. As they went to university, the headmaster would ask them to send back a shield of the university that they were at, and they were proudly displayed in the assembly hall to inspire others. The school produced many pupils who would go on to be successful in all walks of life, in various types of careers, in public and business life. There were 4 MPs. So the school was building its reputation from this time onwards.
The school also enjoyed sporting success against other local grammar schools, with cross-country being a particular strength. The popularity of the school gained momentum during the 1950s, and Jack Taylor was keen to improve the facilities on offer, epitomised by events like the building of its very own swimming pool. An ambitious project, it was both paid for and built by the parents, and opened by an Olympic medal winner. Ted Moore, a former pupil from around this time, later returned to the school to teach PE.
One of the things with the swimming pool coming into being, it could be used for lots of purposes as well. I remember Dave Statzer getting canoes. He had built a couple of canoes in the woodwork room and we could use those in the pool.
Let's have a look at Mr. Pemberton demonstrating that what goes down must usually come up.
One of my strongest memories of being at the school was one of the first years being in a swimming gala and jumping into that pool and my heart literally jumping out of my mouth because it was so incredibly cold.
One of the things I craved was that we could heat the swimming pool. So consequently, we were always asking for money. Please, can we get our swimming pool heated?
During the 1960s, traditional subject boundaries became extended, and Ted was encouraged to become a pioneer, bringing dance drama into the curriculum.
I did dance drama with people and they took part in school productions as well. These guys that were taking part were really into the world of make-believe. I do remember teaching it and really enjoying what I was doing.
Buckhurst Hill's reputation was firmly established, despite local competition from both state and private schools. With several successive generations of pupils launched into adult life, Jack Taylor, it seemed, could hang up his boots content and proud. And yet, as he looked to retirement, little did he know that behind the scenes, political rumblings were growing stronger, and a distaste for the perceived privilege of selective grammar schools was gaining ground.
I personally was aware of the fact that not everybody had the same chance. And, for example, I passed the 11 plus. My brother did not pass. So he never had any higher education or anything of the sort and left school immediately.
In 1964, after a long Conservative reign, Labour came to power, and one of Harold Wilson's manifesto pledges was to reorganise secondary education along comprehensive lines. Tony Crossland became Secretary of State for Education, and just as the governors at Buckhurst Hill were considering who should be Jack Taylor's successor, he sent a circular to all local education authorities, asking them to convert all their grammar schools into comprehensives. It stated, "It's the government's declared objective to end selection at 11 plus and to eliminate separatism in secondary education."
I remember coming back with Anthony Crossland from the Isle of Man conference and talking to him on the boat at great length. And we were all very, very much in favour of going over to comprehensive schools.
Despite the political maelstrom outside the gates, life inside continued as normal. 28 years since the school opened its doors, Buckhurst Hill was now led by Hugh Colgate, a man with impeccable credentials. The former head of the London Nautical School would now have to navigate Buckhurst Hill through a choppy transition.
My granddad actually taught at the school. He was a maths teacher, Bob Sears.
I know.
But
he's a beast.
Got the scars on the ears.
But I know he spoke incredibly highly of Mr. Colgate as a kind of a leader and as a kind of a balanced ship. And I've got it in my head that he actually, Mr. Colgate in the war was involved in running a ship or a frigate or something.
He was a Navy.
But an incredibly sort of balanced attitude towards that almost holistic nature of the school, and sort of treating the the staff with incredible respect and guidance and leadership. And that really permeated the school when we were there. It was a happy environment. It was a happy ship, and I really have an enormous respect for Mr. Colgate as a pupil as well.
One member of staff who remembers working alongside Hugh Colgate is Peter Johnson, who joined the school to teach French and German in 1974.
He was a good communicator. He was very good at keeping his staff in the picture. If you asked for help, he would give it to you. If you felt you could carry on without his help, he was more than happy to leave you to it. He wanted the best for the boys, he wanted the best for the staff.
Converting Buckhurst Hill to a comprehensive school was not going to be a simple operation. There were 8 secondary schools in the area that all had to be considered, but the head ploughed on regardless, with making his mark and bolstering its reputation. Adding to the school's repertoire a new career service and computer studies, stronger links with the girls' grammar school at Loughton meant a welcome addition to school plays. These links would become stronger when the school finally completed its conversion to comprehensive. But while Hugh Colgate was busy developing and improving the school, he knew that a more fundamental change, finding a place for his school in a comprehensive system, would eventually be needed.
During the first 6 years of Hugh Colgate's headship, the Educational Authority only submitted one plan for reorganisation, which the governors rejected. Although a change was needed, everyone knew that, they didn't want to change the school because they liked it as it was. It was successful, the parents liked it, the governors liked it, the teachers liked it, and they didn't want to change. The problem was it split the school. The junior high was in Loughton and Buckhurst Hill County High would become the senior high school. And they were determined not to accept a change that would result in undoing the good work that had been done in the first 30 years of the school's life.
But the Crossland Circular could not be ignored by the governors, parents or staff for much longer. In neighbouring Redbridge, all but 2 schools would become comprehensive, and the children there would no longer be allowed to attend selective schools in other boroughs.
The Redbridge decision was a massive blow for Buckhurst Hill County High. Over its whole time, it had taken around 25% of its intake had come from the areas which were now part of the London Borough of Redbridge. The intake actually dropped to less than 60, and that made a 3-form entry non-viable for the school.
By 1974, it was clear that time was running out. A decision about the reorganisation was needed to avoid the possibility of the school closing. But then, an 11th-hour reprieve. Essex County Council finally offered a viable solution that could save the school from collapse.
The plans were very good as far as I could see for Buckhurst Hill. We were going to be on the Buckhurst Hill site, the Loughton girls would be moving over to the Buckhurst Hill site, and there would be a joint 6th-form block, which everyone thought would be a great idea.
The funds from the sale of the Loughton Grammar School buildings and a small nearby secondary modern school called the Brook would be poured into this project and allow it to happen. Detailed plans of the new school were drawn up and shown to governors and staff. It seemed like an ideal scenario may finally be on the horizon.
Everyone seemed to be fairly positive about everything. There was a very good morale in the staff room.
But then came a shock U-turn that no one was expecting.
One morning, Hugh Colgate came in at 8:30. He pinned up his notices, but you could see that something was worrying him. And he couldn't contain it. He said, "I've just had a letter from Loughton High. They have said that they're not going to move here to Buckhurst Hill. They want to stay where they are, and they've suggested that we move to the Brook."
The The governors had given a green light to the latest plan, and Hugh Colgate had even made their approval public to the parents. But now, with a negative response from Loughton High and no word from government level, the situation was looking worrying.
The staff reaction was pretty much the same as Hugh Colgate's reaction. He was not pleased, and no one was pleased. First of all, we'd lost the certainty that we're staying where we are, and secondly, we'd have to move to Loughton, and the Brook was a secondary modern school. Its facilities weren't great, and we were really not too pleased by the whole thing. Well, it was worrying.
The official response was received in the summer of 1975. The plan had not been endorsed by the Secretary of State, and Essex County Council was being forced to reconsider the matter. The school had to do a complete about-turn, holding 3 emergency governors' meetings in quick succession and looking to the council for answers.
The school was then controlled totally by the local education authority. They were the bosses, and we knew that Mr. Bliss was a senior person there. So when it was announced that Mr. Bliss was coming to speak to us, people were quite happy. At least now we would get the official version, so to speak, because there had been so many rumours, sometimes on a daily basis, and they were really flying around, and it was disconcerting.
The official reason given for the refusal of the plan was the cost. The sale of the buildings in Loughton wouldn't cover the cost of the building work which was needed at Buckhurst Hill, County High.
None of us on the staff took that seriously. Buckhurst Hill, Loughton, falling property prices. Now, who are you kidding? The whole East End was trying to move into Buckhurst Hill and Chigwell and Loughton if they could possibly afford it.
In my view, if that 1974 plan had gone ahead, it would have saved the school from its ultimate fate.
He breezed through the plan, which wasn't new to us, and then he asked for questions. He got a lot of questions. He did seem a bit surprised that we were so angry and worried about it. And there's one question I remember extremely well. Helen Price asked him, "We have to move away from this lovely site. What are you going to use it for?" And he said, "Dear lady, imagine the clubhouse and a driving range down this beautiful hill. Can't you imagine people flocking to that?" And we all thought, this is really serious. In his head, and he's one of the bosses, he's already closed this place.
The future of Buckhurst Hill County High School was now hanging in the balance. Pupil intake was still dropping. New plans were hurriedly drawn up by the council, proposing the very thing Hugh Colgate had tried to avoid, splitting the school. The governors were forced to agree to plans to accept boys from the secondary modern school, the Brook, which needed to close, and take on its buildings to create a joint sixth form centre shared with Loughton High School for girls. Inconveniently, however, the sixth form centre was located some 2 miles away from Roding Lane, the site of Buckhurst Hill County High. Hugh Colgate now also found himself charged with the education of the remaining Brook pupils until they reached the 5th form.
When it did happen, when we were in the 3rd year, we just noticed the kids were different. They had a different attitude, and I suppose it just got a bit rougher, you know.
Buckhurst Hill itself was now on a clunky path to becoming a comprehensive, with a bilateral entry of selective and non-selective students for 4 years.
Under the bilateral system, it enabled the governors to appease the parents of the selected boys that they would be given grammar school education for the next 5 years until they completed their GCSEs. But there were downsides. It delayed the onset of the complete conversion to comprehensive, and also it created in the school a form of apartheid.
Bruce and I started in 1978, so we entered the bilateral system. Having not passed the 11+, I'd never have got to go to this school that I was so keen to go to anyway, so in many regards it really worked for me. I guess it was a sense of it was a broader intake, and that's possibly a good thing. I don't know about how the effect that it had on staff.
I think some of the teachers did struggle with the change to the school system with the non-selective kids. I think Mr. Loveridge, I think, was one teacher who really struggled with it because he'd controlled his class using his wit. And this style, which he developed over 20 or 30 years, worked really well with the brighter kids, but I don't think it worked with the non-selective kids.
And we were very naive. We just thought the teachers had a job, turned up, taught us, disciplined us if required, went home. But I think to a lot of them it was a vocation where they wanted to impart knowledge to boys that wanted to learn. And I think it probably did push some of the teachers to leave early or find other jobs, yeah.
I think in the first year or so we did quite well. I taught non-selective classes, they were called. I taught them myself. I was very pleased with them. They were very happy. They were motivated. Yeah, the academic level wasn't good, but I could teach them the rudiments of French. They were happy to be learning French, and there was really no difference there. By the time we were getting to the third year, there was a group of boys who were quite difficult. I can use Mr. Colgate's words. They come from families who are very well known to the police. And it worried me a little bit because our staff was academically very well qualified, but they were less well qualified to deal with basically boys who want to be disruptive. That drove the morale down, further and further down, yeah.
The Brook buildings were now the sixth form centre for Buckhurst Hill and Loughton pupils. What seemed like a viable solution became a logistical nightmare for Hugh Colgate and his team, trying to negotiate the 2-mile distance between classes. The boys, though, relished the break from lessons and their newfound freedom.
I remember walking there with Jeff Ansell. Yeah. I seem to recall it was done in such a way that we could either walk there or walk back over lunchtime. So we'd eat a sandwich kind of on the way.
Using your own time, yeah.
Using your own time.
I never felt great pressure to rush. I always felt if I was late, I was late, but that was my that was my way, you know.
I think nowadays, if a school said you've got to walk an hour to go to your lesson, there'd be utter outrage in the local community. It'd be all over social media. Wasn't the case then. You just got on and did it.
With the benefit of hindsight, establishing a sixth form centre more than 2 miles away from the main school now seems to be more desperate than ambitious. The school could never afford to staff the sixth form centre adequately, and it meant that 16-year-old pupils were being given the freedom of university students when they really needed more supervision.
It's been a nightmare to actually organise the timetable, the schedule for one of the members of staff.
Oh, yeah.
But whether it was me or the school, I didn't feel that the sixth form experience in terms of education was as good as the school. We were a little bit forgotten, yeah. I thought, and a little bit detached and maybe not cared about.
Feel part of the school.
The teachers kind of went to the annex, taught the lesson and then left.
Yeah.
So there was very few teachers on site any time, so if you needed any help then you couldn't find them. And also there was no control of discipline, so pretty much we did whatever we wanted.
Removing sixth form pupils from the main school also meant that the junior pupils in the school were unable to see them as role models in sporting and academic achievements.
When I taught at the Brook, it really should have worked. We had bright girls, bright boys, tiny group, but it didn't. The building was weird, everything was old-fashioned, huge barn-like classroom, and we were just tucked in one corner, and it just didn't work. It's so easy to blame bureaucrats, but in this case I think it really was justified. They thought if you can put a good teacher together with a small group, it will work anywhere, and it's not true. The atmosphere was awful, and all my colleagues who were teaching at the Brook felt exactly the same way.
By now it was the start of the 1980s, and Buckhurst Hill County High had completed its 14-year journey to becoming a comprehensive, with no more selective entries. But this new status quo was to be short-lived.
The predicament that finally sealed the school's fate was the fact that the birth rate in the area was dipping. And the cruel irony about this was that the school and what made the school vulnerable to closure was the fact that it was still a single-sex school. If the 1974 plan had been adopted, and the school would have been a co-educational school, much larger, and it would have been immune to the temporary dip in the birth rate that happened.
By 1985, following district consultations and public meetings, rumours were rife that Buckhurst Hill County High School would close altogether. And as Ian Nicholson took over from Hugh Colgate as head, the writing was already on the wall. Low staff morale, a lack of cohesion, low birth rates in the area, and no more fight left to give. The balancing act of the last decade derailed.
At this stage, the staff were beginning to resign themselves to the fact that the school was eventually going to close. Several of them took the obvious decision, it would be much better for me if I left now, and a lot of people did.
Mr. Colgate talked at coming up to the 50th anniversary of the school, that was a few years in the future, that there may not be another 50 years to follow. Looking back now, I think that was quite poignant, a thought, and I think Mr. Colgate knew what was happening, what was on the agenda, and obviously he'd been living it for 10, 15 years, so it was kind of an end of a story, of a saga.
Half a century of highs and lows, of political inertia and local wrangling, of lost opportunity and education. From the Second World War to grammar glory days. From successful local comprehensive to an unviable school. A year after its 50th anniversary in 1989, Buckhurst Hill closed its doors for good.
Yes, I can't remember exactly when I found out it was closing, but I was very sad that it was closing.
It was a bit of a shock, and I think everyone was very surprised.
I remember feeling sort of vaguely sad, but now I probably feel more anger.
Yeah, I mean, I've got anger, but for possibly a different reason. I mean, I remember thinking at the time, there is a decline in the birth rate, but sure as eggs is eggs, it will rise again. So this is an incredibly short-sighted perspective. And given that it was a school that was performing so well and seemed to be very inclusive, I had a couple of friends who were a good number of years younger and were still going to that school and getting a lot from the experience. It didn't appear to be a failing school even at that point.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a shame for sort of local politics to play a role in, you know, in a school that only survived for X number of decades, isn't it?
And ironically had quite a socialist pillar to it.
Yeah.
There was an irony in it all, I suppose.
Yeah, yeah.
I was shocked that it happened so quickly. I thought the school might have had a little bit longer, and I'd heard that there were various things going on, but it just seemed a terrible waste that a good school had been destroyed. I got the feeling that we'd been singled out for closure because of the potentially valuable site, and that's a pretty bad reason.
I knew a number of county councillors, and when I told them that I disagreed completely with closing Buckhurst Hill County High School, a number of them were not very, although they were my political out, were not very sympathetic because they thought they were getting rid of a grammar school. I thought they were getting rid of a school that was a tremendous asset to the community.
Sadly, the school then lay empty for the next 4 years. During that time, there were some rumours that the school might reopen because it was known by then that the birth rate was actually rising again. But it was too late. The site was sold, and they had to also make a decision to build eventually a new school in the area to replace it.
A victim of both inaction and heavy-handedness, modernisation whilst clinging on to the past, national and local politics, Buckhurst Hill County High School is in many ways a metaphor for the lack of common ground on education our governments still grapple with today.